Welcome to Lexington Remembers. Thank you for joining us today, November 10th, 2022, as Lexington Remembers continues its efforts to capture events, people, and topics that are really pieces of Lexington's history. I'm Donna Hooper, and with me today is Peter Kelley. We, along with other members of the Lexington Remembers group, continue the work of our founding members Dan Fenn, Jackie Ward, and Bob Edwards. With today's topic, we discuss a piece of Lexington's farming history, specifically that of piggeries and slaughterhouses. To give a little information before we talk with our guests, just to give some background on Lexington's farming. Even in the early years, Lexington's economy really centered around farming and was primarily an agricultural community. And even in the early 1700s, there in the town meeting minutes, you can see where votes were taken to let swine, quote, go at large for the coming year. So even then, they were dealing with pigs or swine. For the next 100 years or so, dairy farming and animal husbandry thrived. And then it started to decline as Lexington became a suburban community and development occurred. A few numbers to think about. In about 1780, there were 452 cows in Lexington. 1810, there were 556. And that's shortly thereafter was really the peak milk production. And then with the growth of transportation, agriculture in the town decreased. In 1928, there were 3 cattle and hog dealers listed in the town directory. We had the Ryder Farm on Maple Street, the Cutler Farm at 5 Fields, and pigs were really still raised in Lexington until the 1960s, according to the Department of Public Health, Dorothy Jones's information. And Carroll's Piggery on Allen Street was the last piggery to close in about 1966. Besides pigs and cows, there were a numerous amount of fowls, chickens, and in Lexington. At its peak, there were over 6,000 in a year. And we have a representative with us today on slaughterhouses. In 1913, 6,544 animals were slaughtered in Lexington. And at that time, in 1918, we were the third in the state with the value of animals slaughtered. So we had peak production going on. Licenses were granted by the Board of Health, and the selectmen were the Board of Health for many years, so it was mutual. We had Amos Holman on Hill Avenue. He had a slaughterhouse license. It was interesting, they shifted off days. So one slaughterhouse did Mondays and Wednesdays, another one did Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, only during certain hours. Gustav Bunzel was over off of Lowell Street and East Street over in that area. He operated on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays. He paid $100 for his license in those days, which seems like an awful lot of money to me. August Young on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, he had a big operation, and then Whiting on Mondays only. So there's information on the operations during those years. One of the trends I think we'll see as we have our conversation is the keeping of pigs, and the Board of Health over numerous meetings had to take action onto whether the pigs interfered with the well-being of Lexington's residents. And numerous times I saw that they said that the exercise of the employment of keeping pigs is attended by noisome and injurious odors and is a nuisance and hurtful to the inhabitants of the town. And that was kind of a key phrase that they used when they were trying to determine whether they should renew licenses and permits or not. A couple of names before we get into some of our guests here. We had Ryder Stock Farm. We had Jenny Cody on Greenwood Street, had 35 swine in 1928. George Bailey on East Street at Board of Health at some point depending upon the operation, refused permits and gave people an opportunity to rectify the situation so they would find it acceptable. In 1928, Michael Carroll on Allen Street had 50 swine. Swenson Brothers right next door had 100 swine. And in the 50s, we had, Bernice Fogg, that name was brought up before. What was her husband's name?
Lester
Fogg. He had 200 swine. And Dailey's farm on Merritt Road actually had 1,500 poultry that they were waiting for a permit on. 52, they granted licenses to some of those folks, as well as up around here, there was a Middlesex County House of Correction up in this area someplace. So it wasn't the hospital, it wasn't the
Never spent any time there.
House of Correction. They had swine. So Lexington, that was a budding Waltham, so that was near Potter's, I guess, too, not too far away. In 1952, Walnut Farms, which was Potter's Piggery, had 900 swine. 52. And Joseph Monsignor on 76 Laconia Street had a slaughterhouse that was permitted.
That's right.
So those are just some numbers that throwing out for folks to put things in perspective. And we have a little bit more, but I'd like at this point to introduce our guest, and thank you for joining us today. We have representatives of 4 families that actually operated piggeries and slaughterhouses. One slaughterhouse. So John Carroll, welcome. He's from the Carroll Brothers Farm on Allen Street. Bill Dailey, welcome. Dailey Farm on Merritt Road. Steve Potter, Potter's Piggery, welcome. And Warren Monsignor, your family had both a piggery and a slaughterhouse.
Correct.
So we have a few questions that we'd like to just get things going and share your wealth of knowledge on your family's operation. So I think the first question would be your farming operation. How did it really work? What was the size of its operation, specifically relating to the raising of pigs, as well as any other accompanied operations? And
the collecting of the garbage.
Yeah. And for those of us that don't know a heck of a lot about pigs, you can give us a little tutorial about pigs. So Warren, just to get things going, your farm was on the far side of Lexington, where the other fellows, their farm was not too far from each other, really.
Correct.
And your family had both a piggery and a slaughterhouse.
That's correct.
So can you just give us a little information on that?
Well, the operation was in full swing when my father bought the farm in 1944. Unfortunately, things slowed down during the war because my 2 oldest brothers were both drafted into the Second World War. The rest of us brothers were younger, so we were limited on what we could do. My father did hire some people to help with the operation, but we raised livestock, we slaughtered as well, and there was also other vendors, let's call them, that would also rent space in the slaughterhouse to do their own slaughtering.
Now, Warren, where was the piggery? Was it in...
The piggery was right out behind the slaughter. We had a 40-acre farm, incident.
Okay, that's off of Laconia Street?
Off of Laconia Street is Young Street.
Young and, okay, back in...
And my father's property was Young Street, 3rd and 4th Streets,
right.
Part of Rumford Road, and then it went up to what the town still owns, 12 acres.
No, it was his
of land they took by eminent domain for anything for the public good.
But that was your family's
site or whatever.
Warren, that was your family's land
That's
that the town took as the 12-acre piece.
Yeah. Yes, it was a total of 40 acres.
You yourself grew up on Laconia.
Absolutely, yes. So a lot of what we produced from the slaughterhouse was merchandised through my father's retail wholesale outlet that he had in East Cambridge. I have a picture of that they would kindly take a picture of and show it. So it was quite extensive. His retail operation was also wholesale, And hotels as well. He supplied to hotels. Anybody that would buy the product.
Did he sell it at the piggery on Laconia Street?
No, all the retail sales were. Well, I imagine there was some that took place, but predominantly it was from the Cambridge retail wholesale outlet we had.
And when did that end? When did the slaughterhouse operation end?
1955.
With the passing of your father, or
No, that the town would no longer renew the license.
oh, I see.
I saw on some of the appraisals with the town, different properties in town, that it wasn't uncommon for a family to have a couple of pigs in there, and apparently up to 2 pigs you didn't need a license.
Evidently,
So
right.
did those folks bring their pigs to you to
In
slaughter?
many instances, we picked them up to bring them for slaughter and custom prepare them how they wanted, hams, chops, whatever.
So your father's place in Cambridge really was the next step from the slaughterhouse to like a butcher shop.
Yeah, it was a butcher shop, exactly.
Okay. Anybody else like to go first next, or shall I just kind of
Go, Bill.
start on the
All right.
left? Bill, what tell us about Dailey Farm and normal operations?
The pigs.
The pigs.
The pigs, right. The dad was really the first one to raise pigs on the farm. My great-grandfather bought the farm in 1861, and Dad started to raise pigs shortly after he got out of high school, which I think was in 1912. And there were 3 piggeries. Piggeries were really just shelters. They were not any type of elaborate building. You would not find a piggery around today, I don't think. You'd find cow barns, but you wouldn't find piggeries. The secret was to have a surface where you could put the garbage out, poured concrete surface, hopefully, and then the shelter for the pigs. That was basically the structure. And Dad raised pigs there. He would also sell a lot of small pigs called suckers. Normally the litter that a pig will produce would probably be somewhere between 6 and 8, I would say, something like that. And fortunately, most of them survive. Pigs are probably the easiest animal that produces meat to raise. Much easier than a cow or a beef cattle or something like that. As I say, the shelter is rather primitive. They eat garbage. We used to get a lot of bread from Ward Baking, Tip-Top Bread down in East Cambridge on Portland Street down there. Thomas's English Muffins.
Yeah.
The Roma Bakery in Union Square, we'd get the stale bread from there and give it to the pigs. There was a wonderful fellow by the name of John Saghetti who lived on Cherry Street.
Yes.
And he was the yard master at the B&M Railroad in Charlestown. And my brother and I would go over in the truck. They would get in a freight car, and the potatoes would be spoiled. And my brother and I would go over with the truck and get the 50-pound bags and bring them home. I remember one day we went over. They had got in a freight car that was full of watermelons. And the watermelons were all packed in straw. And they had spoiled. And you would go in there, and I had on low-cut work shoes. I remember it well. And you'd step on the straw, and you'd go right into the watermelon. And it would get all over your sock, and it was awful. But anyway, we'd bring home the watermelons. We'd scoop them up with a shovel, put them in a barrel, and put the barrels on the truck, and bring them home and just put them on the feeding platform that I described, and the pigs loved them. And Dad actually had pigs there until he died in 1971. Yeah.
Now, did pigs they eat anything, or
Almost
Pretty
anything.
much?
Almost anything. And thank goodness they're generally healthy animals. I mean, sometimes you'd lose one or something. You didn't like to do that, but they were good eaters. Good eaters. And it would take about probably from the time of birth 8 or 9 months to get them up to 180 or 200 pounds. That was the goal.
Yeah.
I think the butchers liked that because you wouldn't have too much fat. When you went over 200 pounds, then most of the added weight was fat.
Yeah.
When did the operation start to slow down or reduce the volume of the piggery? Was it after the war, or did it slow down prior to Well, in the
It
50s.
wouldn't have been after the war. It would have been later than that.
Okay, 60s?
Yeah,
Still-
it would have slowed down in the 60s, certainly. Yeah, Dad was getting older, obviously. Yeah.
But you were a young man in the 50s and 60s, and you were pushing the watermelons home.
That's right.
Chasing girls.
Giving out free watermelon.
You had mentioned you also had agreements with other food service operations
Right,
that
right.
you would go and pick up their.
We'd pick up the garbage
Waste.
at restaurants along the way.
Right.
Staten Arlington at Ring Sanatorium up on Park Ave, and then go down to the Reservoir Club at down in Cambridge,
Yep.
Holy Ghost Hospital, then to the Harvard Club, and it was a regular route that we had. I would do it on weekends when I wasn't in school, and
And
Yeah.
you got some bonuses in some of that garbage too.
right.
didn't
oh
you?
sure,
What'd you get?
Harvard Club?
I had more breakfast at the Harvard Club in Boston than most of the members. Dad would give the chef a pig, a roasting pig, a small pig, probably, I guess that would probably be 30 or 40 pounds, at Easter and at Christmas. And then when we were in there, we'd always get a wonderful breakfast. God, it was good. They had warm blueberry muffins. They had French bread from Albert Duplain. They had the eggs, the bacon. Oh, first class.
Was there competition for these suppliers of the garbage with other piggeries?
I don't remember that there was a whole lot of.
Or did you have your own
competition.
turf? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, I think there was some competition for the garbage up at Fort Devens. They would bid that out, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Places
go-
like that that generated a whole lot of garbage. There would be some competition for it, and the towns collected
Right.
garbage.
And that's what Steve's family piggery was. The source for garbage for your piggery was community collections, right?
Yes, after World War II. In particular, a lot of the towns smartened up and would put their garbage out to bid.
Right.
Before that, we had a fleet of trucks. We had 9 trucks and 2 men per truck. And they would go out every day and pick up garbage, and probably in Lexington, Woburn, Brighton.
So there was a relationship with the piggery and the resident themselves, or with the community at large, that you had the right to collect in, say, Lexington or something? Or was it, you mentioned a moment ago that towns started then bidding out for the service, the right to be able to collect garbage?
Right.
Is that what it was?
Right.
So the town would get some revenue from letting it be an exclusive collection for, say, Potter's Piggery.
It would help the town with their collection, the bids. And some years we'd actually have to cut back on a number of pigs that were raised because a bid that we thought we might get,
You did. Yeah.
from the city of Woburn.
So when you had a city's right to collect, was that also municipal, say schools and stuff? You collected all garbage that was generated in the
Yes.
community?
Yep. And hospitals and,
But there was competition for that garbage.
yes. Yep. Obviously,
So awesome.
they would lose some bids some years. I think we were probably a fairly large operation. I think we were more like 2,000 pigs. Generally, that 900 that I heard you say, I'm sure was an undercount. That my father.
Well, that's what you told the town when you had to
Yeah.
get assessed.
Can you give us an overview of your operation?
I think most people realize the farm was where Potter Pond Condos is now, and that 50 acres was, it was, like Bill said, it was, we call them houses, but they're low structures with fenced-in yards, and the pigs were free-ranged, unlike today, the big hog farms in the Midwest. They don't free-range their pigs. It's not economical, but back then they were free-ranged. We actually had 3 long piggeries, maybe 15 pens on each side of a road that the truck would go down, and you clean them in the morning with the manure, and then you go again with the garbage and offload the garbage into the pens, They would have a sow and its litter in each pen. And you have 15 pens per side, 30 pens, and 3 piggeries. Take 3 or 4 weeks to wean the pigs, and then they'd be out of there, and the next group of sows would come in. We were probably marketing 30 to 35 pigs every other week, which we didn't slaughter our pigs in town.
And your pigs were shipped for slaughter?
Assembable packing and Brighton stockyards.
Right.
But there weren't times when your piggery used Warren's slaughterhouse?
No.
Not a relationship?
No.
So you took them in the big
pigs
city?
We took to the Brighton
prices.
stockyard were different than the market pigs. They were sows and boars. Sows that got too big. The pig never stops growing.
Right.
And after 3, 4, 5 years, a sow might be 350 pounds. It would be too big. It would, in the pens, it would roll over and kill half the litter or something. And so those sows and boars would go to the Brighton stockyards, and you got nowhere near as much per pound.
Yeah.
But of course, they weighed a lot more than a 220 market pound pig would.
The motivation.
Eating? Would they eat that?
Yes.
It would just be fattier, or
It certainly wasn't as tender.
Right.
What would be the motivation to let them get to that size?
They were good sows. They were.
He produced.
Our litters were more like 10 or 12. Bill's sounds like he was only getting 7 or 8.
Yeah, you got 10 or 12. He kept the pig around.
And then, they would be, we called them shoats, and then it would go into a yard, and there'd be hundreds of these shoats, and then they'd move from one yard to the next as they got bigger, until they got close to market weight. And then, but as far as the garbage collection, we had a big platform, concrete sides, and concrete base. The trucks would come in from Woburn and Cambridge and Brighton, and they would just back onto the platform, dump the garbage, and we would, with a tractor, you'd pick up the garbage, bring it to a platform of these different yards, different sizes of pigs, and you'd open the gates, the pigs would run on the garbage.
And that continued to about 1960, Steve?
1961, I think.
And then you made it into a golf course.
Yes.
Which worked until Potter's Pond condominiums. So it's about 15 years, I think.
The golf course took several years to build. They also built, there's still buildings on where Tricon Sports is now. I think the golf course was 1980, 81 they began construction.
I see.
For Potter Pond. So it was...
Now, John, before you fall asleep, you got to tell us about the Carroll farm, Piggeries over there.
Grandfather came from Ireland, and nobody would hire him, and he purchased the farm for about $400, and he raised 14 children. My father was the youngest of 14, and they actually, most of them left in their 20s to seek their fame and fortune. But my father and my Uncle Joe stayed on the farm, and they raised cows for milk, chickens for eggs, and they had a small amount of pigs, which at the height was about 300. And it was a very hard life. They were, a small operation, but they survived, and one of my brothers kind of took it over until they were put out, and he moved on to a different town and, tried to pursue it. But the raising of the pigs was very difficult. I remember one winter, the snow hit, and we had no way to clean out to feed the pigs. So what they did is they let the pigs out, and they walked through the snow down to the front to feed. And that was, kind of a smart thing to do because they would have starved.
Sure.
So they found their way through the snow.
They found their way through the snow.
Hunger is a motivation.
There you go.
Okay. And also I can remember my father planting probably about 5 acres of tomatoes. And the pigs would get out and come down and clean out the tomatoes. And that was kind of the joke of the day,
Did your family source garbage off the property?
Yes, we bought garbage from different vendors that would pick from different towns and bring it in. And then the state decided that they wanted to boil the garbage. And that was the most horrendous smell when they cooked the garbage. They had to bring it up to a certain temperature to boil and then dump it onto a platform to eat it. And the pigs, they didn't want to eat it after it was boiled. It was,
That state regulation came in because of a disease?
Correct. Yeah, it was a cholera.
Cholera, okay.
Okay. And they were blaming the garbage for poisoning, starting the cholera, which whether it did or not, I don't know. But it was a hardship to my father because they had to, put in a boiler system.
Yeah.
They had to put a system to steam the garbage and everything. And that was kind of the demise of the pigs because of the smell. It infumated the whole town, let alone the neighborhood. I can remember when they'd cook, oh my God, you could smell it everywhere.
And this would have been in your childhood, 50s?
Yeah. And it was just, very, very hard life.
Where did you take the pigs for slaughter?
We took them to Brighton. Okay.
Oh, Brighton, okay.
Yeah, they would sell probably 4 times a year.
Oh, okay.
And,
And you'd truck them in? Or
yes. Yeah.
They wouldn't come get them?
No.
But you weren't a collector of garbage in the town of Lexington?
No, not at all. My brother, he also collected garbage throughout a lot of the restaurants throughout Boston and everything, and Wonder Bread. To this day, I won't eat Wonder Bread after they.
Did the pigs particularly like bread, or it was cheap and easy?
It was cheap and easy, and the bread would fatten them up.
Right, yeah, okay. I can see that. Yeah. Especially Wonder Bread. You wonder why it's bread.
And you found a few trinkets in your garbage,
Oh,
John.
my God.
These are good stuff.
The silverware, okay? Sterling silver that you'd find in there. And the little cream bottles and different things that became collector's items. It was very, unique.
These were off of the restaurant tables.
Off the restaurant tables. And I can remember one time when we were getting the house garbage, a lady lost her ring, and my father found it.
Oh, wow.
And she was so happy to get it back. And I think she gave my father $10.
Yeah.
And that would be like $1,000 today. That was the greatest when he found her diamond ring. But it was, it was a lot of trinkets, a lot of...
Bill, you got garbage from the Harvard Club. You must have had some pretty nice silverware.
Fine silverware. Fine. We lay it out at big events.
Holiday at the Dailey Farm, all the quality silver.
My father would sell the silverware to pay the taxes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay?
Talking about steaming the garbage, though, we also had to outfit trucks with pipes and a boiler and hook the hoses up to the pipe to steam the garbage. So it was piping hot, and I think I explained to you that we would dump our garbage on a platform and open the gates and let the pigs eat. Well, the first time that we steamed a load of garbage and dumped it on the platform, and we opened the gates, the pigs came rushing in like they usually do, and of course they were walking into the steaming hot garbage, and they just started screaming, and they went over the platforms, they went over the walls. Took us the rest of the day to round them all up again.
They
learned fast.
You got to cool it down,
Yeah, they learned fast.
When they didn't go for that steamed mush, whatever it ended up being, did you transition it all away to, like, now they don't feed pigs food waste, right? They feed them grains or something.
Grain. In the Midwest, that's a big thing, feeding grain-fed pigs.
And they also reach 220 pounds a lot faster if they're grain-fed.
Right.
I think they can do it in 4 or 5 months, where it took us 7 or 8 months to get them to 220.
But you stayed with table waste most of the time. That's what you fed the pigs food garbage.
Garbage. Sometimes we'd go down to Baker Chocolate. They would call us, and they would have big drums of chocolate and powdered milk and breads also, and that's what we would give to the ones that were closer to market weight, because that would really fatten them up.
Is there any material that would come off the truck farms around Lexington that weren't for piggeries but were vegetable growers? Or
we used to get pumpkins. I can remember loads and loads of
squash,
pumpkins.
things that caught an early frost or something, and just
apples too. That was another thing. We'd get apples.
Yeah, there were a lot of apple orchards around.
Yeah. But you had to be careful of the apples, because we had cows and the horses, and they would overeat, and they would, they couldn't digest it.
Right.
And we lost cows because of that. And also, you had to be careful, the cows, if they eat the bread, that would kill them. They couldn't digest it.
So you had to keep the animals away from different foods.
Separate, yeah, exactly.
But the farms that were agricultural producers, squashes, corn, that stuff didn't find its way into piggeries?
Yeah, no, that did. It was, but most of the little farms, they also had, a pig or two, and that's,
Right.
and the different animals that, the chickens and stuff, it wasn't a big money-making deal, so you improvised. You had to, do what you had to do to survive.
Right.
So why was it beneficial, other than Potter Piggery was a big operation, where for the family farm, why was it beneficial to choose pigs instead of more like dairy cows or
Chickens.
And as I say, pigs are pretty easy to raise. And you do have the big litters to start with, as a cow would have one perhaps. And were generally healthy, and they were easy to raise, and they would eat anything. So it was an economical animal to raise.
There was a market for them.
And there was a market for them.
And you got a decent per pound rate.
Yeah, you'd sell them by the pound.
Who doesn't like bacon?
But there was an additional component. There was a saying, every part of the pig is used except the whistle. That included the blood. Portuguese people have what they call blood pudding.
Yeah.
It's marsala. They eat every part of the pig. The intestines are used for casing, sausage casing. That was one of my jobs in the slaughterhouse. We called it running guts. You'd hold the knife on an angle and start pulling the intestines, and you'd untangle the intestine from the rest of the stomach. Put a hose in it to blow out anything that was in them, and then put them in a wooden box, a salt box, with salt. And those were sausage casings. But every single part of the pig was used. There wasn't much left for rendering.
So did your operation make the sausage, or did you sell the casings?
We did it at our retail outlet in East Cambridge.
Okay.
Well, isn't that called hot dogs today?
That's what natural casing,
Kielbasa.
absolutely true. Sausage, hot dogs.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Yep.
But you never found the benefit of opening the shop in Lexington.
Part of our property had a garage that Gus Young used as a retail outlet.
Oh, okay.
But you got to remember, there weren't that many people in Lexington in them days.
Okay.
I think when we moved in 1944, I think the population was like 13,000.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a large population.
Much better market in town.
Exactly.
So the slaughterhouses kind of met their demise before the piggeries did.
Pretty much. Once they started building houses close by, the residents started complaining of the odor.
Was the slaughterhouse to an adjacent neighbor? What was more offensive, a slaughterhouse aroma or the piggery aroma?
I'd say it was 6 of one and a half a dozen of the other. And the other thing was, once the residents started moving in, They didn't like all the cattle trucks coming in and out too, and garbage trucks or whatever.
Right.
You know, the traffic count elevated immensely.
I think, John, you said in our earlier conversation that everyone wanted to come out to Lexington and live because they enjoyed the country and the farms. When they got out here, they complained about the smell, and they shut the farms down.
Everybody wanted to live next to a farm.
Yeah.
Until they lived there next to a farm.
Then they realized the smell, the noise that goes along with
There
it.
you go.
And then the first thing they want to do is put them out of business.
Right.
And then when they put them out of business, they didn't want anybody else to build next to them. They
Right.
want the farm to stay.
They wanted the open land.
The open land. But they don't understand, you know. And even today, the pigs, how many people in Lexington have pig valves in them, in their heart?
That's right.
And they got them from Carroll Farms.
So that
Go ahead.
the conflict with the neighbors, really. So with the time, Steve, you made a comment before about 128 really had a major impact on local. There were piggeries all over the place.
Yes, 128, which goes through Waltham, must have gone through 8 or 10 farms. And that was the end of those pig farms, of course. I mean, they made out very well, I'm sure, but...
When the land was developed, Bill, when the land was developed on Fallen Hill, probably before the war, most of the housing up along there, and mentioned before how Win Coet was marketing the housing up there, but the people were complaining about the Dailey farm smells, and there was pressure on with regard to the pigs of not having the piggery continue.
Well, there was pressure, but the town fathers were pretty good in the sense that they tried to carry a lot of the farms, I think, as long as they could. And the early complaints were handled, but then they became more intense, and it just was impossible to keep going.
You couldn't get farmers to be on the board. They didn't want any part of that.
That's right.
I understand.
Well, Steve's father...
Too busy feeding the livestock.
Right, yeah. And exhausted at the end of the day.
Steve's grandfather was a selectman for a long time.
Yes.
Sure.
So you helped keep the farms popular.
Like Bill said, you know, I think the town fathers did the best they could. The pressure just kept increasing and kept increasing. And
it really wasn't just Lexington then, right? I mean,
no.
Just with development overall, and the open space became house lots, and even though people were interested in living near a farm, they weren't interested in having some of
The same problem happened in Waltham with the Casella and the Kennedy farms.
Right.
You know, the neighbors, drove them out of business.
As the generation aged, the motivation for the younger generation to continue the practice of farming wasn't at all
It was
popular.
declining.
Right. So, and the money spoke. It was everyone had land 50 years earlier, but now the land was harder and harder to get, buildable land.
Right.
And it had good dollars associated with it, a lot more than pigs did.
Right.
And another thing that came into being was garbage disposals.
Yeah.
Everybody started putting their waste down the sink.
That's right.
And, you didn't have the feed for the pigs.
That's right.
All about convenience.
And we were just saying earlier, before we taped, about what goes around comes around.
Right.
So now what's happening?
Now they've decided that they want to go back and collect garbage, and try to recycle it up at the Lexington dump. And, I don't think, the smell is going to change at all.
No.
And I think
We have much better smelling garbage now.
Well,
50 years
I
ago.
don't know about that. Maybe, more expensive garbage. They've done takeout lately.
Wasn't there an
Well, it
old
wasn't
saying,
fun
my
getting
garbage
stuck
don't
behind
stink?
a garbage truck in those
Your
early
garbage
days.
stinks.
No.
Not mine.
We were hoping you didn't get at a stop sign behind a garbage truck. Well, at least the landfill has a decent amount of open space up there. It'd be interesting to see how that goes, though, and what current technology might be able to keep it not so...
Well, this is motivation to keep
It's going to depend on which way the wind is blowing.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. But
I always went to the class reunions, and you know how they would ask for a quote for the class reunion booklet. I had put in there at one of the, well, we haven't had any recently, but one of the last ones that we had, that I was going to bring back the pigs. And oh boy, did I have a lot of people come over, and they were enthusiastic about that possibility that the pigs would be back.
When you were in school, did your friends come to your pig farm?
Sure.
And was it like an experience? Or
It was an experience, and they'd love to come. And of course, there'd be an old truck that we could ride around in, and it was exciting. And the pigs would be out there. The yards for pigs, again, are easy to raise in the sense you don't need a big pasture. As Steve said, they'd have an open area where they're free range, but it wouldn't be like a big pasture. And so the kids would see the pigs, and they'd be quite close.
How many field trips do the kids take now to go see animals?
Yeah.
I mean,
A horse.
go up to Davis Farm and pay $100 to walk in to see a goat.
Yeah, right.
You know, we just missed it. You know,
Well, maybe the pigs
should have
could,
charged
don't
them.
give up, Bill. Maybe we get the pigs back.
Maybe we could. Yeah.
So what are your, John, you mentioned it was a hard life.
Very hard life. And,
Right.
I look back now and, I thank the town, okay? They made us make a decision. It was very hard at the time. My father was getting along in years, and, we just didn't want to pursue any further, the farming. But you know what? Tax bill kept coming every year. And so you had to, diversify. You had to come up with something else. And, that's why, the town built up. These farmers, they couldn't afford to continue paying taxes, and they started building houses. Along with houses, we get kids. With kids, we get schools.
Right.
Okay? So it's very interesting how the cycle goes. Everybody wants the open land, but the open land costs a lot of money.
And it takes a lot of work to care for it.
It sure does.
So it has to have a ability to produce in some fashion to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
If somebody said to you, what's your fondest, realizing it was a hard life, what's your fondest recollection if you had to really
Quitting farming.
No, my father was a very simple man, but I always look back, and he was always happy. He would get up at 5 a.m, okay? He ate 3 good meals a day, but he had a very peaceful life. And, I think all of us search for that peaceful life, and he found the secret.
Yeah.
And I've been looking for that all my life, too.
Time for another piggery.
Any other recollection?
My family's experience was different than John's. My grandfather was very lucrative operation. He had rock gardens all around his house. He had a fish pond. My father and his 2 brothers got brand new cars on their 16th birthday. So it was a completely different experience. I would bring my friends from school over on Saturday mornings because they didn't believe I was driving a truck when I was 9 years old. And so we would ride in the truck, and the older men, the help, would shovel the garbage off the truck and into the pens, or the manure from the pens into the truck. And so I really enjoyed life on the farm.
It was work, though.
Yes, yep. And as I got older, I was the one in the pens, shoveling the manure up into the truck and the garbage off the truck.
And that continued, you said, till the 1970?
I graduated in 62, a year before. Right. Was the last
so
year.
after your graduation from high school, you stayed working at the farm? Or you got out of there?
No, I actually helped build the golf course, and then I went to UMass Amherst and got a degree in turf management and was a superintendent on the golf course. And
so were your cousins involved with running the piggery?
No. I was the only one. My cousins I never saw, except at the holidays. I was the one that went to work on the farm all summer and weekends, and with my dad. And Larry and Ray and Jack, they were into cars, and they were all mechanics. That's right. Had fast cars and hot rods and raced.
So as your father's generation passed, the piggeries and the pressure from the town pretty much ended the time of,
Yeah, my father and Mark both built some houses in Lexington until they got the golf course up and running, and then they all were on the golf course for a few years.
And in the early years of Potter's Pond, you were the general manager of the operation, right?
Yes, I was the site manager. I stayed right there, and Bill Smith asked me if I could stay for a few years, and then I just kept saying I was working for the management companies that were running Potter's Pond.
I see.
An interesting fact, if a pig ate a peach, he would spit the seed out.
Cut it up.
You know?
It was too hard to digest, so why not?
And
You take it out
thing,
the other side.
the
Hurts.
the pigs, okay, they would, the seeds, they would, pass them. And we used to have the best tomatoes and pumpkins and squash. They grew wild.
It was a hard life, but it was a wonderful life.
Yeah.
I often think that I had the best mother and father that anyone could ever have, and they were magicians. They had very little, but you never wanted for a thing.
That's right.
And, my brother and two sisters and myself, there was always the presents at Christmas that you wanted, and a wonderful home life. And, it was wonderful.
Bill, you still enjoy the farm that's there, right?
I do.
The Wilson's farm, the land now?
Yep, the land is still there, and
you get a discount on the tomatoes, right?
I do. They're very, very good to me.
Like Steve said, he was driving a truck when he was 9 years old. I can remember driving a tractor when I was 6, picking the hay up, okay? And also driving the tractor, to feed the hogs and everything. That was the greatest. We thought that was the greatest,
Life to have.
toy land, driving all the tractors and everything in the trucks.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it was a different life,
For sure, yeah. But a good, I should say, a happy life.
a very happy life.
Yeah. You don't sense.
We didn't know what computers were. That's right, too. They weren't invented then.
Probably not, yeah. A lot of things weren't.
As an aside, my father migrated to the United States from Italy in 1921 with $2 in his pocket. He got a job. He eventually got enough money together to open up his own retail store in East Cambridge. Eventually, he bought property, and that's in that picture. And eventually made enough money to buy the farm in Lexington. And when he'd made trips back to the old country, each time he'd come back to America, when he'd get off the plane, he'd kiss the ground and say, "God bless America. This is my home."
There's a strong sense of pride and appreciation
Absolutely.
on all four of you folks with respect
Absolutely.
to the upbringing you experienced and the benefits from it. And that
He always said, the people that you deal with respect. So if I learned nothing else in my life, to respect other people.
the clear and simple rules of life that work so well.
The farm life taught us all common sense.
That's right.
Right.
And
Because that's the only thing that will get you to survive, is using your brain and making sense out of it.
Exactly. And there were people that did it generations before us.
Sure. Yeah. Well, without farming, we wouldn't be here, right?
Right.
Yeah. And there's other than at this stage, Wilson, of course, is still farming in the Lexington area, and to some degree, you see the Ricky land down on the Waltham Street get put into production.
I don't know if there's any of the boozers left on Lowell Street. I know the town bought the property.
Yeah, well, no, it's a community farm. It's a community
Right.
farm. So it's still being farmed.
But I don't know if any of the boozers are left.
For any boozer.
I think he does Ricky's. Doesn't he
Franny
Rick
Boozer
is-
lives on, he still lives
Franny
there,
lives in
right?
Acton.
Dennis.
Dennis, right,
in
Dennis lives
Lexington.
next to the stand, right? Isn't
No,
he?
he lives on Merritt Road now. Just a couple houses down from where we are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't there a
downsized.
Boozer on Lowell Street close to the farm, or did they sell?
I don't know. There's a sister.
The
I know.
sisters still
Yeah,
live there.
Perhaps it was a
could be,
sister.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you all for sharing your
And please,
experiences
this
with
is
us.
something else that enters your mind that would be of interest to get documented and put into the history that we're trying to capture of both farming and particularly piggeries in town. Mention it now.
We have
Well,
your
it will be a shame if piggeries don't come back to Lexington.
No, this is going to be your project.
Yeah. I think it's a good
Since
idea.
you've experienced
Absolutely, I
it,
mean-
you should be able to come up with a big plan.
Everyone values pork. It's known as a very healthy meat.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that people in Lexington aren't enjoying the opportunity to have homegrown pork right from Lexington. And I'm sure that markets would quickly buy the pork and they would sell it and it would be popular and it would do people good. And to heck with the smell.
Yeah. Just ignore the smell.
Some good clothespins.
But always buy upwind.
But if it wasn't for the pigs, a lot of people wouldn't be alive because of the pig valve.
That's true.
Right.
That's right.
Every part. We thank all of our viewers for tuning in on our Lexington Remembers interview, and this will be broadcast on YouTube. If you Google Lexington Remembers on YouTube, you'll find that we have over 85 different interviews, and this will be the newest one. So
And at what point will that be, Donna?
it's usually about a month or so.
We'll get a message out to you when we get the message that it's been created and edited,
Right.
brought out. So you want to get your copy.
I hope no one eliminates my comments at the end.
I don't think we need to edit anything. So thank you all very much.
Thank
And,
you.